Hi, everybody. I'm Jen Cirillo, and I'm the Director of Professional Learning at Shelburne Farms. And I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about my job and what I do. And I'm really excited to hopefully follow up with you and engage in some questions about my kind of unusual job. So, as I said, I am the Director of Professional Learning, and I mostly work with K-12 educators, so kindergarten through 12th grade. It might be some of the teachers that you know and that you work with as well. And I've been doing this job for 18 years now. I started off actually in agriculture and found myself really interested in education. And so working at Shelburne Farms and working with Vermont schools, I get to put together some of the things that I really care about: agriculture, education, and sustainability. And so when I think about my work, I really feel like it's the passion that I have for the intersection of those three things. And I really kind of followed an unusual career path. I worked with an AmeriCorps Vista program, so national service, in art education after coming out of school at UVM with a degree in plant and soil science. But while I was in that art program, I discovered my love for teaching and learning. And for a little while, I actually worked with the city government in the city of Burlington, Vermont, and helped with a sustainability project. And then I went back to school to get my master's in science and a focus in environmental education. So that's kind of how I ended up at Shelburne Farms, was after going back to school and ending up with a master's degree in education that helped me get my job at Shelburne Farms. I don't really have a typical day, and that's actually what I love about my job. It's a different every day, and I find myself in different parts of the state. I find myself in different parts of the country, and even different parts of the world. Some of the work that I do is actually international, and so I've gotten to travel to China and Japan and India, and all over the country. Most of my time is spent in the Northeast part of the United States, and a lot of time in Vermont, but I like the fact that I get to spend some time, if nothing else, communicating with folks in unique parts of the world. And I'm going to share with you a little bit about what my day-to-day work looks like when I'm working with teachers in a moment. But I wanted to tell you that, one of the things for me about this work, I think you really need to like people and places and have a sense of curiosity and wonder about the world. And if you have those things, definitely keep building and honing those skills of curiosity. I think one of the things that's made me good at my job is that I really love learning, and I love school, and I think public schools are a really great way to transform society towards sustainability. And so getting to work with public schools around the country and around the world makes me really happy. And I hope that as I talk a little bit more, you'll get a sense of what it looks like to be a professional learning director. I'm going to actually share my screen and share some images with you because I want you to get a sense of what some of my day-to-day work looks like. And again, as I said, it's not really a typical day that I have. I have many, many days where I do sit at a desk, but I'm going to actually share with you what it might look like to be working with educators and sitting side by side, designing curriculum, designing student projects, and how I would get them started on doing something like that. So I'm going to share my screen, and you'll be able to see some of the tools that I use with teachers. So one of the things that we often talk about with teachers is that we have this framework for how you educate for sustainability. We want students to know their human and natural communities, and so the places that they live. We also want them to understand that the world is interconnected, so that they can make the connection between what's happening in their local place to a global or a national context. and that they know that they can make a difference. That's when we really feel like we're doing a good job as professional learning providers, and that teachers and students are working together to create sustainable communities when they can have all those pieces together. One of the tools besides this framework that I use is these sustainable development goals. And it's just a really simple tool that I use that allows me to work with educators. And I'm gonna pop that back up for you, and have them think about sustainability really broadly. So they might be thinking about sustainability more in the environmental context, but I want them to think about social justice and equity. And I also want them to think about our economy and how our economy and the environment and social justice are connected. So these sustainable development goals, I often actually use them like little playing cards and have teachers have the 17 goals cut out on unique individual cards and have them play around with it. So I'm going to show you what that could look like. I'm going to just share with you a tool that I use called the Jamboard. That's when I'm teaching in a virtual context, but when I'm teaching in real life, I might have these cards cut out and right in front of teachers. This is a virtual set of these cards, and you can see as you click on them, you can move them. And this is a real group of teachers. This is their coursework that they did with me this summer. And I asked them to prioritize the goals, the sustainable development goals, for their self, the community, and the globe. And so I had them explore, what are these sustainable development goals? How are they connected to me personally? How might they be connected to my community on that second line you see there? And how are they connected to the globe? And what would I do to prioritize and make change towards a sustainable community? So one of the things that I do is help facilitate conversations amongst teachers. And that's a skill that you definitely want to have if you do this job. You have to like learning. You have to enjoy being around people, and I think you need to be a good facilitator and help folks have rich, deep conversations. So if I was using this with teachers, they might prioritize these goals according to their own values, their own concerns, but I really want them to do this with their own students. So we practice this with just the adults, and then I would say, go do this with your students and see what they might be curious about, what they might be wondering, how they might prioritize the goals. And some of you may have done that with Shelburne Farms and Up for Learning with Cultivating Pathways to Sustainability already. Then once they might have done that with their students, or even just as classroom teachers by themselves, they might say, these are the things that really connect to my curriculum. I would have them then think about the goals they want to prioritize, or their students prioritize. And this is me meeting with some teachers actually in New Hampshire and thinking about, how do we integrate this idea of good health and well-being, zero hunger, climate action, and life on land into curriculum. So we would be looking for places across their middle and high school. We might be looking for places in their cafeteria to show students some good healthy options that maybe are local, so they reduce food miles, so we're having a less of an effect on climate. So we think a lot about these different areas together. So again, a good facilitation and really enjoying having conversations with teachers is important. And then we might move into some more conversations to think about, here's a question in the background here, what factors affect the ability of your students to access healthy local foods? And these are teachers having conversations with each other. This is getting them to think about, what are some of the factors that are really impacting my students? It could be the economy, it could be just availability of healthy foods. And this helps them start to think about what projects they might do with students. So again, my job in professional learning is really providing support to educators to think about these big sustainability issues with their students. So I really want to facilitate meaningful conversation with them, and also have them build some skills and deepen their skills in facilitating conversations with their own students. Here's where we take teachers out on field trips. They get to go visit gardens. This is the garden at Shelburne Farms. So this is a group of educators learning about different aspects of gardening, about local food. They might be learning some of the science aspects of the garden. They might be learning about more of the social and social justice issues when it comes to food. They might be learning about plant-animal interactions. So there's lots of different things that we can explore in the garden. And part of my job is taking teachers out into the community, out into the places that they work and that their students learn in, and help them make connections to their curriculum, because I want them to get their students out of the classroom as well as bring the learning back into the classroom. And I want students and teachers to be thinking about maybe climate action. And so in this case, what does it look like for us to extend the growing season in Vermont? If we bring in a greenhouse, are we extending the growing season and not having to get produce from California? Or if we are, when we're doing something like this, well, what are the impacts of the plastic? So we really start to uncover some of these issues. So the place, and being curious about the place, is an important part of my job. And we might grow something together or see how to grow something. We might do a taste test. So in this picture on the right, teachers might be making a meal together and having a big salad. They might have harvested, really thinking about where our food comes from. And then also that other part of it beyond the academic part, but how does that make us feel to eat local food and food that we've prepared together? So I want to create those experiences for teachers too. And then in the end, what I really want to have happen is that the learning that they do with me, with other teachers, gets brought back to their own school. So we want teachers maybe to bring back gardening into their classrooms, or growing food together into their classroom, or doing some more sustainability work and thinking about climate change, or any of those sustainable development goals issues. So going back, I'm gonna just pop us back. I again really think this tool right here is one of my most important tools. I want to help teachers think about the human and natural communities, and if that's an urban environment, they might be looking at a city park and going to visit art organizations as part of their human communities. And then they might be visiting urban gardens or rooftop gardens. They might be visiting a park like Central Park in New York City and thinking about how do human and natural communities interact, and what are the benefits of this, keeping these natural communities intact in more urban areas. And then I want them to understand that the world is interconnected, because I want their students to know that too, that what we do in one place matters and it affects other places. And it could be on the small scale of a place, like what we do in our classroom affects the other classrooms, but it also could be what we do in Vermont affects the Northeast, or what we do in the Northeast affects the country or affects Canada. And then I also really want to build this sense that we as individuals and small groups of people can really make a difference. And so that's some of when teachers are integrating project-based learning and service learning into the curriculum, that's when you get that opportunity to practice those skills. And I think it's really important for teachers to practice those skills too. So the other thing, I'm going to just bring us back to the main screen. I'm going to stop sharing. That I love about my job is that since sustainability is such a broad issue, that there's lots of ways, it doesn't have to be food. So if you have passion around any of those sustainable development goals, about equity, about infrastructure, about businesses, about recycling, about fish and wildlife, or air quality, like there's so many different ways that you could get engaged and get excited about sustainability and learning about sustainability. So what I think I would recommend to a middle school student, an 8th grade student, thinking, do I want to be a professional learning provider? You may not want to be one right now, but what you might want to do in thinking about this, if you love learning, and love engaging with people, you might become a sustainability educator and think, that might be something you could start to explore. You might think about some volunteer work in a classroom. That could be really interesting to see. Do I want to be in the classroom, or do I want to work with adults? You could volunteer in an elementary school classroom, or use the Tribe program with 4-H and get into a classroom. You might at home be really interested in a particular part of sustainability. Like, you might be interested in gardening or beekeeping or maple sugaring, or you might be really interested in social justice work. And so maybe volunteering in an organization that does restorative justice in your community. In terms of part-time jobs or things like that, I would explore your passions. Like, you might, when I was your age, I worked in a horse stable. I was really interested in agriculture and making connections with animals. And so I worked in a stable. And then in college, I volunteered and did an internship on a farm. So there's lots of ways that you might get excited about something, but definitely follow your passion. And there's so many good connections with sustainability work. And then I think if you get closer to this idea of doing professional learning, I found it really helpful to shadow people. When I was living in Canada, I shadowed another educator, and I got to see what it looked like for him to do professional learning. And that's when I actually really decided I wanted to be a professional learning provider, was getting to work alongside him. And we were doing energy education in Alberta, Canada. So I would say seize any cool opportunity that you hear about. It all gets fed into whatever you do with professional learning. It makes you more interesting, and it makes you typically more curious about the world, the more experiences that we have. So I hope that this helps you understand a little bit about what a professional learning provider might do. And I look forward to hopefully having some time to answer any of your questions. Thanks for joining me.